Yeah. You might have it. I sort of.
If I could have your attention, please, I'd like to start this session. We're going with a bit of a hybrid format. So our first panelist is going to set the stage by showing some slides. And so we're going to keep the screen down until he is finished. And then the panel will migrate up to the, there's a chair behind us. So if you're wondering where the panel was going to go, we have a plan. Happy to say. So in a way, the macro design of this conference reflects some ideas from design thinking. And so we're looking at challenges and then perhaps ways of moving forward together to address these vital issues that are in focus for RISE 2019. And so in this session, we're going to have an opportunity to speak to some people who are practitioners or work very closely with practice to try to figure out what some of the unsolved problems are, what some of the capabilities are, what some of the areas of friction or frustration that are impeding our ability to prepare for, deal with, recover from, learn from the types of challenges that are associated with extreme weather and climate change. My name is Eric Stern. I have the privilege of moderating this panel today. I'm a professor at the College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity here at Albany. We have some very distinguished panelists. One of them that I believe is still in the program was not able to make it. Steve Jensen of Cal State Long Beach and the Red Cross Advisory Board had a family issue, was not able to attend. But we're very happy to have Dave Kaufman, Vice President and Director of CNA, and a former senior leader, Associate Administrator for Policy, International Relations, and a number of other important things at FEMA. Will lead off for us. Then we have Terry Hastings giving us the state government perspective. Terry Hastings, Senior Policy Advisor at New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. We have Jason Cradaville, who is the Interim Director of UAlbany's own National Center for Security and Preparedness. Jason's had a number of previous positions there, including Chief of Staff, and he'll tell you a little bit about NCSP and what NCSP does. We have David Turetsky of the College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity. Dave Turetsky has lived a number of lives relevant to what we are doing here. He is an attorney. He was Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Clinton administration, had a number of senior positions in different law firms. Perhaps most directly related to what we're going to be discussing today, he was the head of the Emergency Bureau at the Federal Communications Commission during the Obama administration. Will talk to us about the importance of critical communications infrastructure, among other things. Sticking with the critical infrastructure frame, but moving to critical transportation infrastructure, we have Jerry McCarty, the Director of the Office of Emergency Management at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Jerry has also a rich background, a number of different roles at New York City Emergency Management, as well as also at the Federal Emergency Management Agency. I cheated and peeked at your LinkedIn page, so I hope I got that right. So we really have quite a feast in store for you, and so I'd like for us to dig in. So I'd like to pass the floor to Dave Kaufman.
You know that means you have to clap every time. I just want to make sure you're aware of what you signed up for. So I want to do a few things, and I'll try to do this really quickly. Those of you who know me know that brevity is not always my strong suit when I get on stage, so I'll probably be as quick as I intend. But Eric asked a framing question of us in preparing for this discussion, which was along the lines of what keeps us up at night. And so I want to take through a few key trends. These are just a subset of issues that together represent an evolving picture of risk that really does keep me up at night. And then I'm going to highlight what I think is one of the value proposition examples behind applied research benefiting these issues in our field, and then try to leave some opportunity space for all of us. So let's go in. Maybe. There we go. All right. Broad aggregate statement. There's a lot more going on behind the surface than this, but our risk exposure is increasing. Our population is growing and growing rapidly. 60 million more Americans by 2050. We're urbanizing. We're moving to coastal cities, areas that are at risk from sea level rise, increasing storm surge, changes in erosion patterns. You get the picture as we start to wrap in climate change as a function of that. And we're doing that on top of a foundation of built environment infrastructure that in many cases is already operating beyond its original design criteria and is decaying. And so that's not a comprehensive picture of our exposure to risk, but in 3 images, I hope I just conveyed a picture about how rapidly that environment is in fact changing, even when we talk in time scales less than 20 or 30 years. At the same time, technology was never my strong suit. From the things I look at, I also see our social vulnerability increasing. So I put up here some data showing the aging of the U.S. population. We could also put up data on other demographic developments. We could be talking about the fact that in just a few years, almost half of our society will be living with at least one chronic condition, many with 2 or 3 chronic conditions. We could be talking about the medical requirements associated with changes in our health and our lifespans. There are a lot of other dimensions we could be talking about. But aging is a good approximation. 32 million more Americans living over the age of 65 in the next 35 years, next 30 years. And you can see the rate of increase. Oh, no, you can't, because that's on a different slide. Never mind. Today, people over the age of 65 represent 16% of our population. By 2050, that will be 22% of our population. Upper right is a picture of inequality. The top 0.1% of our population owns as much wealth and assets as the bottom 90%. Those lines have crossed. We haven't seen that since before World War II. Between 2009 and 2012, the incomes of the top 1% of Americans grew by 31%. The incomes of everybody else by less than 0.5%. So more people living in poverty or on the edge of poverty, one paycheck away from poverty. More fragility from a financial standpoint in our systems. And you can see, if you focus on the bottom graph, what, for those who are living on minimum wage jobs, the relative purchasing power of minimum wage over time and how that has declined against other measures. So exposure is increasing, social vulnerability is increasing, and unsurprisingly, disaster costs are increasing. And I can show you US data that will show increases at the same shape of this curve. This is a global view from Swiss Re, but the slope of the curve is identical for both number of events and number of really big events, billion-dollar-plus disasters. Same slope of the curve. The reason I wanted to highlight this one is it emphasizes the growth in uninsured loss. And uninsured loss is one of the major drivers of macroeconomic loss in the aftermath of disaster, and it ties right back to those social vulnerability points. So let me color this with just a couple of examples. So I talked about how exposure is increasing. Hurricane Carney dumps biblical levels of rainfall in the Houston and the broader surrounding region. Right, but the story of Hurricane Harvey is not just 50 to 60 inches of rain, it's 35% population growth in Harris County since 2000. 35% more people in 17 years. 25% of all housing stock in the region built in that period of time. Significant changes that bring operational complexity to them way beyond a linear projection of 35% increase. Just as one example on that front. When I look at this curve, we are not doing anything that is effectively bending this curve back down, right? Now, all the trends I just talked about push this curve further up from a costs impact. So I want to give you one example, and it's one that I am personally very interested in, of how I think applied research can really benefit us as a field of practice. So this is work that I've been intimately involved in my day job at CNA. We did a retrospective study looking at supply chain resilience in the aftermath of Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria. And this is a small excerpt from some of our data looking at Puerto Rico specifically. So I'll tell you a very quick story with this. I'll show you maybe 4 bullet points, and I'll be out of your hair. Hurricane Maria hits Puerto Rico, and the lights go out. You can see the satellite imagery, and most of you I'm sure have, and if you hadn't, it's a quick Google search away, where you can see the before and after for the light up on the island. And the presumption is, power's out, telecoms are down, everything is going to be down. And that's not a wrong assumption. That's a natural assumption that we make in the practitioner space. So, FEMA launches what is the largest food mission in emergency management in our country's history. It originally calibrated to try to feed 3.4 million people on the island, 2 meals a day, so a planning target of 6 million meals a day. It is not an unreasonable assumption if you think that everything that feeds people every day has gone down and is important. But as you can see, it didn't go down. So what you're looking at in the blues, and the organization literally changed during the course of this data, so that's why you have 2 different names and 2 different shadings. But this is a proxy for sales in the grocery industry. This is generated from tax data. And you can see in the purple where Maria gets landfall, and you can see a significant spike in grocery sales almost immediately. In fact, most grocery stores were open in 3 to 5 days, and they were conducting transactions at elevated paces. They were getting supplies. Not the same supplies they always got, maybe not from the same places. Fresh meat was hard to come by. Frozen foods were hard to come by. But food was being transacted in grocery stores all across the island. Not everywhere, not every grocery store, but as much as 125% of pre-landfall levels. The public sector had no visibility into that picture. We had dual systems. And that big food mission push I mentioned, that's that little bit in red down there at the bottom. At best, 5% of the market. That was not for a want of trying. That was the limit of the relief channel to what it could accomplish in aggregate. And so I use this example for 2 reasons. Because number 1, it highlights relative capacity. In government, we tend to think of DoD as the 800-pound gorilla. DoD is not the 800-pound gorilla. We're talking about food, water, medical goods, pharmaceuticals, things that allow life to sustain and thrive the private sector is. And number two, if we create the mechanisms for visibility back and forth in those sectors, we can open up a world of possibilities. So I just wanted to share that, one, because I'm doing a little selfish kind of push for our own work. But I put the link down here pretty small, so it's not that big. It's not like I can do that next. And then, these are going to advance this way. All right. And then I just wanted to leave you with what, for me, emerges from this picture as areas of opportunity for that kind of work to move us forward. Understanding social determinants and helping to better calibrate the focus of emergency management programs to address the kinds of group issues that we just talked about. I'm just going to put this down. Unsurprisingly, you'll see me talk about lifeline supply chains as an area where I see tremendous opportunity. What that really represents, though, there's a microphone there. What that really represents is learning to co-create. The language of emergency management often defaults to language around direction, control, and importantly, an implicit assumption of responsibility over everyone who is engaging. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about pooling capacities across non-traditional partners, within the public writ large, within industry, that are working in advancement of their own motivating interests, but in a way that can co-create outcomes of shared importance. We don't know how to do that very well. And lastly, and this really should have been on the last panel, because there was a great example of this in the last panel that I was participating in. This is about growth planning in our communities. It's about a set of discussions that drive development and economic growth and vitality and the kinds of issues that elected leaders run for office on that are not about emergency management, but which are setting the conditions for which we are then dealing with, and we don't have good connectivity in that space. So we could have a much longer list, and I'm sure you will hear many more examples of the things that should be concerning us and the opportunities that lay before us as we think about how we bring more capacities into play in our field, but I'll leave it at there. So back over to you.
And so we figure out how to move the screen out.
Are we up here now?
Yes, and so I'd like to ask the panel to, it's like a James Bond movie, to join us on the secret table. So, thank you all for your patience as we reconfigured here. I would like to give the word to Terry Hastings, the gentleman on my right, who will give us his take on this topic from a pracademic perspective. I did not mention it before, but we're also very proud to have Terry as a faculty adjunct at the college. He's been doing fantastic work with our students, also hosting capstone projects and interns and really building bridges between academia and practice. So, Eric?
Great, thanks, Eric. So interesting topic to debate here and talk about. Really kind of what I look at as the sweet spot between academia and the practitioners. And I don't know, it seems like a natural fit, but we don't often travel in the same circles. And again, I have a foot in both worlds, so I guess I can say we. I think academics tend to write and focus on their work for other academics from time to time. And I think the practitioners often have their head down, especially in our business, emergency management, literally dealing with the crisis of the day. So that big picture thinking sometimes gets tabled fairly quickly to deal with whatever the issue is. So I think it's great to have forums like this where we can have a conversation about how we can partner together. And I think it really comes down to moving beyond just sort of the notional or the big picture and defining specific deliverables to work on. And that's some of the success that we've had at DHSES, partnered with CHC in particular, about definitive projects. So Eric and I have been doing some work on our Managing Chaos workshop for senior officials to bring the academic insights, again, that academia brings to the problem of looking at issues, trends, and challenges, in this case around crisis leadership, and then the practical experience of leaders that have been there and done that, and sort of merging those perspectives together to have really, I think, a rich set of insights that can be both academically tested, right? It's rigorous, and that these findings that we've looked at over the course of many years in different events, they're sound, they're academically analyzed, but they're also practically implemented, so they make sense to the practitioner. So we've had great success doing things like that, where we bring the academic perspective and the practice together, and we see where that sort of overlap is, and that's kind of what we focus on. In this case, that workshop is about, again, crisis leadership, crisis decision-making, and crisis communication. 3 topics that have been studied fairly extensively, and then certainly from a practical standpoint, those are the areas that will make or break you during a disaster. So that's an example of, I think, where we're getting it right. Also partnered with Jason's group at NCSP, doing some really great training that's, again, inspired by research and real academic rigor behind that. And then the internship program, as Eric mentioned, we've, I think, placed well over 150 interns in the last 3 years, mainly from CHC. So we have this great pipeline that we're working on, and then these capstone projects where we give interns a common or a practical problem that we're dealing with, something real time, and have them go to work on it, look at it from a new perspective perhaps, not colored by bureaucracy, as we often are in government, just sort of, okay, go tackle this, come back with some ideas, and we've been able to implement some of those ideas. So it's been really cool. So I guess that's my opening salvo, and thanks for having me here.
Great to have you here, Terry. So I'd like to give the word to Jason Gretel on my left, who will give you a perspective from the National Center for Security and Preparedness.
Sure, thanks. Everybody hear me? Sure, and thanks Eric, and thanks everybody for allowing me to be part of this panel and talk to this audience. I was encouraged during the plenary session to hear the drum being beat at this level and to this number of people is something that is deeply important to me and the organization I'm here representing. So the National Center for Security and Preparedness has been at Albany since 2007. We were, what's a kind word for it, absorbed by the College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity. When that came online, we sort of helped build that out in its early stages. But convening academia and practice to sort of take ideas and bridge them into solutions has been part of our DNA from the beginning. And what we focus on, and everybody's kind of familiar with this, you start to have a conversation over coffee, you talk for, a good hour, you get all excited, and you've got this great idea, and then somebody completely deflates the room by saying, great, how are we going to do it? The NCSP's focus is on getting past that, I think it's a common consulting term, the deadly chasm, which is the large gap between idea and the implementation of that idea. We've seen some success, especially with New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services over the last 10 years in integrated response and large-scale response to complex incidents. New York State had co-developed by these two partners what I believe was, if not the first, definitely one of the first statewide programs on integrated response and complex coordinated attacks. Medical decision-making